an act of terror. That's what the president is calling an assault on two National Guardsmen in the nation's capital. So the two soldiers remain in critical condition this morning after police say they were both shot at point-blank range, just blocks away from the White House.
We saw one National Guardsman being wheeled out on a stretcher, and he had a device helping pump his heart, it looked like, doing automatic CPR, and his face was covered in blood.
We're not going to put up with these kind of assaults on law and order by people who shouldn't even be in our country.
Okay, so here is something that should tell you everything you need to know about where things stand right now with the Trump administration and why his advisors are probably losing sleep over what is happening. The president just got hit with the kind of news that keeps political operatives up at night staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything went wrong so fast when they thought they had a winning strategy all figured out. His signature issue, the one thing he was supposed to be absolutely unbeatable on no matter what else happened, is suddenly turning into a political disaster that is dragging down his entire presidency in ways nobody on his team anticipated when they rolled out these policies. Immigration was supposed to be Trump's trump card, if you will pardon the expression. It was supposed to be the issue where he could always count on strong poll numbers and fired-up supporters ready to go to battle for him no matter what. But right now, right at this very moment as we speak, the backlash is exploding from every direction, and the polls are showing something his team really does not want to see at all. Let me give you the numbers right up front, because the numbers tell the story better than anything else I could possibly say about this situation. Trump's approval rating on immigration has dropped from around 50% back in mid-March down to roughly 41% by mid-November, according to Reuters and Ipsos polling data. That is a 9-point drop on his single best issue in just a few months of his second term in office. And his overall job approval rating? Gallup now has him sitting at about 36%, which represents a new low for his entire second term in office. A new low. On the issue he built his entire political identity around for the past decade of American politics. Can you believe this is actually where we are right now after everything he promised? But before we go any further, real quick, let's be honest, you can't really trust mainstream media anymore. That's why we built Pump Politics, to bring you real stories, real context, and no corporate spin. If you want to stay ahead of the headlines, join our free newsletter. We'll send the news straight to your inbox every day. Just click the link in the description to join, and if you just want to support what we're doing, join us. Be part of the community that actually cares about the truth. All right, let's get back to the video. So, what happened here? How did we get from Trump, the tough guy on the border who was going to fix everything, to Trump scrambling as the backlash explodes all around him from every direction? It all goes back to what happened after that tragic shooting near the White House, where a National Guard member was killed in a shocking act of violence that stunned the nation. Instead of offering a measured response that might have brought people together during a moment of national grief and mourning, Trump went full throttle in the completely opposite direction. He seized on the tragedy to announce what he called a
Welcome back. We now want to bring you a CBS News exclusive. Two Department of Homeland Security officials tell CBS News U.S. border agents have been court-ordered to stop deporting migrants under President Trump's asylum ban. As you do on this and many other topics, and joins us now with more. Camilla, good morning.
Good morning.
Tell us about this new order now and what it means.
Sure. So just to level set, back in his first day back in the White House, President Trump issued this unprecedented proclamation, Errol, that suspended asylum processing at the U.S.-Mexico border.
Permanent pause on migration from all third world or poorer countries around the world. Permanent, not temporary while they figure things out and review their policies carefully. Not a brief pause while they review security procedures and come up with better solutions. Permanent, as in forever, with no end date and no clear legal pathway back for anyone affected by this sweeping decision. And he did not stop there with just the dramatic announcement on social media. His administration then instructed officials across the entire country to halt all asylum decisions nationwide without any warning to the people affected. Every single pending case in the entire system, frozen indefinitely with no timeline for resolution. They also stopped issuing visas for people traveling on Afghan passports with no explanation of when normal processing might resume. The whole immigration system basically ground to a complete halt overnight based on executive decisions that legal experts immediately said were shaky at best and almost certainly unconstitutional at worst when challenged in court. Now, here is the thing that Trump's team probably did not fully think through before they made all these dramatic announcements to the press and on social media platforms. Yes, this kind of red meat rhetoric absolutely fires up the base every single time without fail. The hardest line supporters in the Republican Party love hearing about permanent pauses and mass deportations and locking out entire countries from American shores forever. That is exactly what they have been wanting to hear for years from their political leaders. But there is a whole lot of America that is not the hard right base, and those people vote too in elections that matter. There are suburban voters in swing states who decide close elections. There are moderates who could go either way depending on the candidates and the issues. The Latino community is reacting even more strongly to what is happening with these new policies. A new survey connected to Pew Research found that somewhere between 70 and 78% of Latinos say Trump's policies are actively harming their community in real and tangible ways. Roughly 2/3 say their standing in America has gotten noticeably worse since Trump returned to office for his second term. And majorities are saying his deportation push has simply gone too far and is hurting innocent people. These are not small numbers buried in the margin of error. These are massive warning signs flashing red for anyone in the White House who is paying attention to political reality and thinking about the future. All right, let us get into what is really happening here, because there is so much going on beneath the surface that most people watching the news are missing entirely in the daily coverage. The media is covering this as just another Trump immigration controversy in a long line of immigration controversies going back years. But this is actually something much bigger and more significant for understanding where his presidency is heading over the next few years. This is a moment where Trump's signature issue is actively turning into his biggest political vulnerability right before our eyes in real time as the polling data comes in. Let me walk you through the timeline of how we got to this point, because the sequence of events matters a lot for understanding the full picture of what happened. On November 27th and 28th, just days ago, Trump posted on social media that he would permanently pause migration from all third world or poorer countries effective immediately. He said he wanted what he called reverse migration to expel millions of people who were admitted to the country under the Biden administration over the past 4 years. Millions of people who are already here building lives and raising families in communities across America. He did not name which specific nations would be affected by this sweeping ban on immigration. He did not outline any clear legal framework for how this would actually work in practice or hold up in court. He just threw it out there as red meat for his base without any of the policy details that would actually be required to implement something like this through proper legal channels. The very next day, his administration started putting pieces of this announcement into action, or at least trying to put them into action before the legal challenges started. Internal directives went out telling asylum officers across the country to stop at the point of decision entry and hold every single case indefinitely until further notice. Visa issuance was halted for people traveling on Afghan passports with no explanation of when it might resume or why Afghans specifically were targeted. The entire asylum system that processes thousands of cases every single week was essentially frozen overnight with absolutely no warning to the people affected and no timeline for when things might start moving again. Now think about what this actually means in practice for real human beings who are caught up in this system through absolutely no fault of their own. There are people who have been waiting years, literally years of their lives in limbo for their asylum cases to finally be decided one way or another so they can move on. They have been following all the rules the government set out for them to follow. They have been showing up for every single appointment they were told to attend without fail. They have been doing everything the system asked them to do while waiting patiently for their turn to have their case heard. And overnight, through absolutely no fault of their own and with no warning, their cases just stopped moving forward completely. Nobody in the government can tell them when processing will resume. Nobody can tell them what this means for their futures or their families or their children. But here is where it gets really interesting from a pure political analysis perspective that should concern everyone working in the White House right now. Trump clearly thought this dramatic announcement would be a winning move that would rally the country behind him during a moment of crisis. He thought he could use the tragedy of the National Guard shooting to justify the most aggressive immigration crackdown of his entire presidency and look strong doing it. He thought voters across the political spectrum would rally around him as the tough guy protecting America from dangerous outsiders who threaten our safety. But that is not what the polls are showing at all right now. Instead of rallying enthusiastically to Trump, voters are actually pulling away from him on this exact issue that was supposed to be his strongest political asset. Let us talk about why this surprising backlash is happening, because it reveals something really important about the limits of fear-based politics in America today that Republicans need to understand. Trump has been running basically the same playbook on immigration since he first came down that famous escalator back in 2015 and launched his political career with controversial statements about Mexican immigrants. Scare people about immigrants coming across the border illegally, promise to be tougher than anyone else has ever been, build the wall and make Mexico pay for it, deport everyone who should not be here regardless of their circumstances. That playbook worked really well for firing up his base voters and winning Republican primaries against more moderate candidates who could not match his energy. The fundamental problem for Trump is that there is a big difference in how voters perceive two very different approaches to this issue. Being tough on illegal immigration polls pretty well across the political spectrum because most Americans agree the border should be secure and immigration laws should be enforced fairly. But announcing permanent bans on everyone from poor countries sounds extreme and cruel to a lot of people who might otherwise support basic border security measures. When you start talking about permanent pauses that last forever and mass expulsions of millions of people and locking out entire nationalities based on how wealthy their home country is, you lose a lot of people who were actually with you on basic enforcement, but cannot stomach the extremism. And the economic arguments are starting to cut against Trump too in ways that are creating serious problems inside his own political coalition. Business groups and agricultural interests across the country have been sounding alarms about labor shortages that could get much worse if these aggressive policies are fully implemented as promised. Farmers in red states need immigrant workers for their fields during harvest season, or their crops will rot. Construction companies need workers for their building projects in growing communities across the Sun Belt. Hotels and restaurants need staff for their operations in tourist destinations that drive local economies. When you start talking about deporting millions of people and permanently banning immigration from large parts of the world, the business community gets very nervous very quickly about where their future workforce is going to come from. There is also growing international criticism that is creating diplomatic headaches the administration probably did not anticipate when they made these announcements so hastily. Other countries around the world are watching what America is doing, and they are not impressed with what they see happening. Traditional allies are questioning whether they can count on the United States to uphold its traditional role as a beacon for people fleeing persecution and violence in their home countries. Adversaries are using this as propaganda to argue that American values are hollow and hypocritical when tested by real-world challenges. The soft power costs of these policies are real, even if they do not show up in domestic polling immediately. Here is something else that is fascinating about this political moment. If you step back and look at it objectively from outside the partisan bubble, look at the complete disconnect between what Trump is saying publicly every day and what his own polling numbers are actually showing about public opinion. He is out there projecting toughness and strength every single day on social media and in public appearances, acting like he is in complete command of the situation and doing exactly what the American people want him to do. But the actual numbers say something completely different from his confident rhetoric that everything is going great. His approval on immigration is down 9 points from where it was earlier this year. His overall job approval is sitting at a second-term low, according to Gallup. Okay, so let us break this down into what really matters here and what you need to understand about where this is all heading in the coming weeks and months ahead. Because there is a lot of noise swirling around this story from all directions, and I want you to clearly see the key dynamics that are actually going to shape what happens next for this administration and for the country. First thing you absolutely need to understand. The polling collapse on immigration represents a genuine crisis for the Trump political project in ways that go far beyond just one issue among many on the agenda. Immigration is not just another policy area for Trump the way healthcare or taxes might be for other politicians who built their careers on different issues. It is the absolute core of his political identity and the foundation of his appeal to his base going back to the very beginning of his political career when he first announced he was running for president. When he starts losing ground on immigration of all issues, it raises fundamental questions about whether his entire approach to politics is even working anymore in a changing America. His approval dropped from 50% to 41% on this issue in just a few months of governing. That is not a small statistical fluctuation within the margin of error that can be dismissed. That is a significant erosion of support on the thing he is supposed to be best at doing. Second thing, the permanent pause rhetoric is clearly backfiring because it sounds extreme and frightening even to people who genuinely support border security in general terms and want immigration laws enforced. There is a big difference in the public mind between saying we need to secure the border properly and process people through legal channels in an orderly way versus saying we are going to permanently ban everyone from poor countries forever based solely on where they happen to be born. The first position polls well across party lines because it sounds reasonable and fair to most Americans. The second position sounds radical and cruel to a lot of voters who are not hard-right ideologues and who make up the majority of the American electorate that decides close elections. Trump seems to genuinely believe that going more extreme will always energize his base enough to overcome any losses he suffers in the political middle ground. But the math simply does not work that way when your overall approval is already sitting at 36%. Third thing, The Latino polling numbers are a flashing red warning sign that should absolutely terrify Republican strategists who have spent years hoping to make inroads with this fast-growing demographic group that is becoming more important in election after election. Pew Research connected surveys showing between 70 and 78% of Latinos saying Trump's policies are actively harming their community is a devastating number with huge implications for the future. Two-thirds saying their standing in America has actually gotten worse since he returned to office is even more alarming for the Republican Party's long-term prospects in a diversifying country. And majority saying the deportation push has gone too far suggests this is not just about rhetoric and words that politicians use. People are seeing real impacts in their actual communities, and they do not like what they see happening to their neighbors and family members and co-workers who are being targeted. Fourth thing, the economic concerns about labor shortages are creating visible cracks in the Republican coalition that could get much wider if these aggressive policies actually continue being implemented as Trump has promised. Farmers in deeply red states absolutely need immigrant labor to harvest their crops when the season comes, or they face financial ruin. Construction companies run by Republican donors need workers to build houses and commercial buildings in growing communities across the South and West. The hospitality industry that drives tourism economies in many states needs people to staff hotels and restaurants that serve millions of visitors every year. When business interests start openly clashing with immigration hardliners within the same political coalition, that creates real tension inside the coalition that Trump depends on for his political survival and governing majority. So, what happens next in this unfolding political drama that everyone in Washington is watching closely? Trump is facing a choice that goes against every instinct he has developed over decades in public life and business dealings. He can either moderate his approach, dial back the most extreme rhetoric and focus on enforcement measures that have broader bipartisan support, or he can keep doubling down on the same aggressive strategy and hope that somehow the political dynamics shift back in his favor over time. Based on everything we know about Trump and how he operates under pressure throughout his career, he is almost certainly going to keep doubling down no matter what the polls say or what his advisors recommend. That is just fundamentally who he is as a person and as a political figure. He does not back down from fights ever. He does not admit mistakes or change course when things go wrong. He escalates confrontations until someone else blinks first. But that strategy clearly has real limits, and we may be watching those limits become painfully visible in real time right now as the polling data comes in week after week. When your approval on your absolute best issue drops 9 points, and your overall approval hits a second-term low, doubling down is obviously not working the way you think it is working. The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results somehow. And right now, Trump is doing exactly what he has always done throughout his career and getting worse results than he has ever gotten before. The next few weeks are going to be absolutely critical for understanding where this situation is heading. The asylum freeze is going to face serious legal challenges in federal court that could embarrass the administration badly if judges rule against them and issue injunctions. The permanent pause rhetoric is going to keep generating headlines that make moderate voters in swing states uncomfortable about what is happening to the country they thought they knew. The Latino community is going to keep organizing politically against policies they see as directly targeting their families and neighbors and communities. And the polling numbers are going to keep coming in every few weeks, showing whether this is just a temporary dip or the beginning of a more serious political collapse. Here is the fundamental question that everyone in politics is asking right now about this situation. Is Trump projecting genuine strength from a position of confidence, or is he actually reacting out of political fear because he knows things are not going well? His loyal supporters will say he is being strong and decisive and doing what absolutely needs to be done regardless of what any polls might say about public opinion. His critics will say he is clearly panicking and overreaching because he knows his political position is weakening and he does not know how to respond effectively. The truth is probably somewhere in between those two interpretations. But one thing is absolutely clear. The backlash is real and it is growing, and pretending it does not exist is not going to make it go away. For Trump supporters, this looks like the president being tough and keeping his campaign promises, while the hostile media tries to spin everything negatively against him no matter what he does. For Trump critics, this looks like an administration losing control of the narrative and making desperate moves that are hurting real people and damaging Americans standing around the world. But the polls do not lie. The numbers do not care about political spin or media narratives or what anyone wants to believe about reality. And right now, the numbers are saying something very clear. Trump's approach is not working the way he thinks it is working. His approval is dropping steadily month after month. His support on immigration is eroding on his best issue, and his response so far has been to do more of exactly what is causing the problem in the first place. Keep watching this story closely. Because what happens next could define the rest of Trump's second term in office. Is this just a temporary rough patch he can recover from with time and better messaging? Or is this the beginning of a broader political collapse as voters reject an approach they see as too extreme for the country they want to live in? The backlash is exploding, the polls are dropping, and Trump's next move could determine whether this gets better or much, much worse for everyone involved.